Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Shepherd's Corner. The question is, do you believe? To believe or not to believe? That is the question. And Archbishop G started a conversation with us about our belief in God and so on. You know, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. And that struggle, those questions that we all ask ourselves as we grow up. And so today is, take two. Today is take two, or part two. And he headlines it with, in the beginning. Good evening, Archbishop Charles Jason Gordon. How are you?
Doing really good, Reverend Deacon. Doing good in the midst of a big bang.
In the midst, yeah, boy, we in a big bang.
In the midst of a big bang here. And that is a wonderful moment. But let's go and see where we go.
Yeah. So my question is, why do you believe that God exists? And this is part two in the conversation.
Everything that has a beginning, everything that exists has a beginning. And that's a simple statement. It sounds real simple. If it exists, it has a beginning. But there are many profound implications to the statement. And especially when we apply it back to the universe. But this was not always accepted. Some people believe that the universe always existed. And the universe was what always existed. See, after all, when we go back, all the way back, we're left with only two options, Either the universe always existed, or there was someone or something that existed before the universe which set the universe in motion.
Well,
that's the real question.
That's the question. Because I'm watching your background behind there, and it looks like it was something set it in motion.
Well, that's what we have to wait on and see. But it's either the universe and matter and time and space always existed, or matter, time, and space came into being in some finite moment. That's really what we have to play with. Because what I'm looking at today is not just whether I believe or don't believe, but why? Why I believe that the option of God or the belief in God is reasonable. Why I believe. And from laying another foundation. Last week I asked people, don't judge, be humble, let's inquire. Today I'm saying, let's do the inquiry, but let's really keep an open heart, open mind, and see what this really leads us to.
So I see you're calling on some big names, some big scientific names. Here it been like Newton and you know what I mean, these big guys, Hawkins and Newton and so on.
Yes. You see, Newton's first law of motion states an object at rest stays at rest, and an object in motion stays in motion with the same speed and in the same direction unless acted upon by an unbalanced force.
A little bit of physics there, boy. That looking like a little bit of physics. You're taking me back to where physics is.
I keep telling people physics is one of the most important things I ever studied in my life. Because of physics, I have access to cosmology, philosophy, and other things. Because of physics, I was able to start up Trinity. Because of physics, I understood electronics, I understood how to set up a television studio. But because of physics, I could follow people like Hawkins and Newton and understand what they're saying. So what is Newton saying here? An object at rest stays at rest. An object in motion stays in motion with the same speed and with the same direction unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. What is he saying? That without a force acting upon an object, it will stay in the state it is in. either at rest or in motion. So if you consider space having no friction,
Correct.
and no gravity, no friction, no gravity,
Yes.
then an object in motion will stay in motion, and an object at rest will stay at rest.
Understood.
Good. In the Earth's atmosphere, we have gravity. And with gravity, what that means is that an object at rest, would not necessarily stay at rest. Because if I let this go, it falls because a force, an unbalanced force, is acting on it. That unbalanced force we call gravity. So what Newton is saying, and this is very important, is that things don't change their direction or their motion without an external force acting on it. And that's what is really critical in understanding this first law of motion by Newton. You see, if the universe is moving, then there was a force that set it in motion.
I follow with you. I'm a student of physics too. I follow with you.
If the universe is moving, then it does not look to us like the earth is moving. But when we look at the earth in relationship with the sun and the moon and the other planets, we know that the earth is moving. What set the earth in motion? What set the stars in motion? What set the sun in motion? What set all the planets in motion? How did they come to be in motion? Was it that they were always in motion for all eternity? Or was it that they were set in motion at a finite moment at a specific time? That's really the question that I'm asking. And this leads to two possibilities. First, everything was always in motion and there was no beginning. It was always so. And this is a challenge for the second law of thermodynamics, because the second law of thermodynamics says, which is entropy of an isolated system always increases. The entropy of an isolated system always increases. What is entropy? Entropy is a lack of order or predictability. So a system always degenerates or declines into disorder unless some force is acting on it in the opposite direction. You just think about your room, your office, or your desk. It doesn't get neater with time unless some force acts upon it where it actually gets neatened up in a specific time. So any system that we can think about, it gradually declines. It gradually declines. If we consider the universe as a system, then it could not evolve. It could not reach higher and higher states of perfection and consciousness without an external force acting on it. In fact, without an external force, it should devolve into greater disorder.
So what's this force?
Well, I ain't Russian. I'm not Russian, because I want to at least establish two things. First, either everything was always in motion, or there is a force that was imposed upon and acted upon everything that we do. Second, that every system degenerates unless there's a force acting on it. And what we have seen and what evolution claims is that we have gone from lower forms to higher forms with the passage of time.
Well, you're talking about, I like that thing about, without an external force, it would devolve into greater disorder. That's like my wife and my bedroom. You understand? So
she's the force.
She's the force.
And so we know she's a greater force.
She's a great. So you know what's going on by me.
Correct. So these are some of the laws of physics. I'm not inventing these. These are the laws of physics. So the second thing I want to say is everything, including space, time, and matter, has a beginning. Everything, including space, time, and matter, has a beginning. This we call either creation or Big Bang, or however you want to frame it. That's what we want to what I'm proposing, and I'll explain why I'm proposing that. Why it is not plausible that everything was always in motion, and why evolution without a creator or intelligent design is not a plausible theory in terms of the big scheme of reality. Because first, things are in motion. Second, the system is evolving and not devolving. And those two, I think, either physics is wrong, or we had to look now for some kind of beginning. So if the first is that everything always was in motion without a beginning, second is everything, including space, time, and matter, has a beginning. And this we will call either creation or the Big Bang, a precise beginning where matter, space, and time come into being. Well, this sounds simple, doesn't it? Huh? But philosophers and scientists have been debating this for years. The origin of the universe is really one of those fascinating things. And I want you to stretch your imagination. We're accustomed to talk about, think about, and mull over the things that are right in front of our eyes. I am asking you to stretch your imagination to mystery. To the mystery that the universe holds before our eyes, to the mystery of creation, to the mystery of these planets and all of their oscillations, to the mystery even of why science even works. Why should science even work? That's a significant mystery. In an essay, The Origin of the Universe, which is a lecture by Stephen Hawkins, he states Aristotle, the most famous of the Greek philosophers, believed the universe had existed forever. Something eternal is more perfect than something created. He suggests the reason we see progress was that floods or other natural disasters had repeatedly set civilization back to the beginning. So it always existed, and its primal state was perfection, but the floods and natural disasters kind of set it back. And so that's why we're not seeing the perfection. So that's one theory. But the motivation for believing in an eternal universe was a desire to avoid invoking divine intervention to create the universe and set it into motion.
Now, you're talking here Aristotle.
Aristotle.
The philosopher.
This is a couple 400 years before Christ.
Right.
He believed it always had a beginning. Universe was eternal. And he argued from that. And Hawkins kind of followed him as we'll see. Conversely, those who believe the universe had a beginning used it as an argument for the existence of God as the first cause or the prime mover of the universe. So again, we're back to two options. Was the universe always in motion? In which case it is eternal? Or did it have a beginning? And the time, space, and matter come into being in this finite moment when the whole thing began. That's the big question that philosophers and theologians and scientists and cosmologists and physicists have been debated from before Christ walked on the earth. And it's an invitation into mystery. That's all I want you to know. Even if you never studied physics, even if you don't understand all the rudiments of physics, just walk with me in understanding what mystery looks like and how capable we are as human beings of entering into sacred mystery and in understanding the sacred mystery. And that I think is what is beautiful for me, exciting and most amazing. That we are capable of mystery. Why? We're capable of thinking about the whole universe. Why? That, to me, is a real big question that this whole topic, yields in dramatic and amazing ways.
So we're trying to balance the theologian in Archbishop G with the physicist in Archbishop G and the philosopher to come to the answer.
Well, and I'll tell you, the physicist is the weakest, because that was A levels. The philosopher, that's a BA, and the theologian, that's a doctor. So, I wouldn't say equally there. But what I will say is, I want to invite the viewer to consider the mystery. Just consider the mystery. That's what I want you to do. Because the mystery is so beautiful for us as human beings to consider. In his work, A Brief History of Time, Hawkins sets out to investigate the whole universe. And he chose, in this big thing, he chose the assumption that the universe always existed, like Aristotle. He only had one little challenge. Small challenge. And that is during his inquiry, based on the observation of the Hubble Space Telescope, they could see the outer reaches of the universe. And during the time of his discovery and his experimentation, it was discovered that the universe was expanding away from us.
Oh, all right. He observed, based on the Hubble telescope, that the universe was expanding away from us. Ah, okay.
That something in motion that was accelerating. Now, that defies law 1 and law 2. Okay? Because if it was accelerating, and then they discovered it was accelerating at a constant rate. So it should have been deteriorating. It was not. So it was accelerating, but the rate of acceleration is constant, not the motion is constant. It's like when you step on your accelerator in the car from a standstill position, your rate of acceleration is constant, not your motion. If you're cruising along a highway, and we know you don't do that above 100 kilometers, we know that. You're cruising along a highway at 98 kilometers, you are at a steady state of motion. But when you're accelerating and your acceleration is constant, it means not only was there a force that set you in motion, but there is a force that keeps you accelerating in motion. You understand the difference? Because if I was set in motion at 100 miles an hour, I should continue traveling along at 100 miles an hour, according to the first law. But if I'm set in motion and I'm in a constant state of acceleration, it means that something had to be propelling me into an accelerated mode and to keep going. You don't keep accelerating unless your foot is on the gas, which means that the engine is supplying power to the car to be accelerated. Now, when he discovered this, when Hawkins discovered this, to his great credit, he walked right back to the beginning and said, all right, folks, let me start over. Because if the universe is accelerating, it means that there was a moment in time when it came into being.
They'd have to start somewhere.
The fact that it is accelerating, it means that some force was put onto it and set it in motion with acceleration. And so this great man, who remains an atheist, he walked right back down and said, well, it had a beginning. What had a beginning? Space, time, and matter all came into being in a single moment. That was called the Big Bang. As we see later in the series, there was a prince who was the father of the Big Bang.
But that's for another show.
I'm only teasing you. Right now. There was a priest who was the father of the Big Bang. So space, time, and matter all come into being at a single moment. And because there's a rate of acceleration and a rate of motion, we can now calculate when the beginning would have been.
Right.
And we could go backwards, looking at the rate of expansion. We could go backwards and say, this thing would have happened about 15 billion years ago. Yeah.
Yes.
We quarrel when we had to wait for 4 minutes or 5 minutes.
Yes.
15 billion years ago. Space, time, and matter were all set into motion. So 15 years ago, what Hawkins and others would say is there was a singularity in space, time, and motion. It was infinitely dense, fine and minuscule in matter, but it came from that into this in what now they're calling the Big Bang. All that is important is that these top philosophers and these top men of physics and science, who are atheists, who would have loved to prove that the universe always existed, had to accept that the universe came into being at a particular moment where time, space, and matter come into being in that moment. And before that moment, there is no time, no space, and no matter. That's what's important.
In the beginning. I love that.
In the beginning. For the scientific community, this caused a major upheaval. Albert Einstein, speaking about the Big Bang, said, "A singularity in time irritates me." I find it nonsensical. Why? Because a singularity in time the moment before the Big Bang, but there was no time. So before time began would mean that something set it into motion, and we can't. It's irritating to the scientists because the scientists can't reach before space, time, and matter begins.
You know, is the beauty about this. The beauty about this is the men you're talking about, they really know what really how this thing started right now.
Yeah. Because by now they done with the programming. Right? So for us, when people ask me why do I believe, my first reason why I believe is because if I trace the science says something to me. Many people believe that science is the greatest reason for not believing in God. And I will say to you, you're not following the science far enough. You're listening to the jokey scientists, but you're not going far enough down the implications of science. And if you go far enough down the implications of science, what you will see is that the science itself has something to say to us about the mystery of the universe. The science can't tell us about God, but it could tell us that we don't know, and that there is mystery, and that the mystery can't be solved by the usual scientific arguments. And that to me is a wonderful blue mind. That's a wonderful blue mind. So when Einstein says that a singularity in time irritates me, I find it nonsensical. What he's saying is that the fact that I can't get behind the beginning and interrogate it is highly irritating, because that's what a scientist wants to do.
Correct.
And you can't interrogate mystery. And what you have before the Big Bang is only mystery. Because we can't reach before time, space, and matter. That's just impossible. Science really and truly should only comment on what is observable. What we could see, what we could hear, what we could feel, what we could taste, what we could access with our senses. That's all science should really be commenting on. But what I'm seeing as a usual trend in science is that scientists have sneaked the unobservable into their reasoning mechanisms. For a scientist, the existence of God or the non-existence of God really should not be anything that they are involved in. They should actually be absolutely neutral to it, and they should be looking for the data to see which way the data carries them. But what I'm finding with the scientists is that, when they see the data that contradicts the assumption that there is a being that set it in motion, that irritates.
But, let's face it. You spoke just now and you said what irritated them was they couldn't go before the beginning.
Yes.
Right? But how are we as finite beings, going to go and explain God?
Well, that's not my question. The point I'm making is they should have no emotional connection to whether God exists or not.
But you see, that's the struggle of the scientists.
And that's why I'm saying they're sneaking faith into the science. The existence or non-existence of God is faith. The statement that God does not exist is a statement of faith. It's not a statement of science. It's a statement of faith. It's a statement of ideology. of idea systems. It's not a statement of the observable. They can't observe and prove QED, God does not exist. And so every time you hear a scientist saying that they are an atheist and using the science to prove God does not exist, the scientist is not being a scientist in that moment. He's trying to be a theologian. A theologian of atheism, but a theologian nonetheless. And the fact that there is an emotional connection when God pops up and they can't discount God already says there's an investment in atheism that the scientist has a priori before even he looks at what is observable. You with me now?
I got you.
You see, both Einstein and Hawkins have an emotional connection to the non-existence in God.
An emotional connection is what you're saying, you know.
That's what I'm saying. So why would Einstein say that it irritates him? It is not in the realm of convenience. It is highly inconvenient that the universe was expanding. Hawkins has to come back and go to deal with the fact that, okay, it had a beginning. All right, it had a beginning. Now, what I love about these men is their integrity. Irritation or no irritation, they're going with the observable, but their heart is connected to what they can't say anything about from the observable, and that is the existence or non-existence of God. And that's where I want to say. This is because science for them was also a religion. And that religion is atheism. And that's one of the big problems in our school right now. That those who are teaching science in the school learn science not as science, a method of observation, inquiry, and therefore prediction, but they learn science as a religion from the people teaching science in our universities who had an a priori commitment to atheism.
What? Yeah. But I can't deny the fact, because when we see this, I remember this scientist saying exactly that. Gaston Gomez, he says, right, 93% of scientists are atheists.
And at the best, a scientist should be an agnostic. I don't know. At best, a scientist should say, I really don't know. Whether God exists or God isn't, not only I don't know, it really makes no difference to me. Think about it. We will never be able to, by observable experimentation, to prove that God does or God does not exist. We just can't, by definition. So why would a scientist say that he's an atheist? An atheist is saying that there is no God.
Correct.
Which is a pronouncement outside of the realm of science.
Correct, because
that is a pronouncement in the realm of faith.
Yes.
Which means that he has a faith, atheism, which is his prior commitment to the observation of the universe.
But he can't prove it.
It cannot be proven.
Correct.
And therefore, if a scientist wants to be honest, the best a scientist should do is say, look, you see the question of God? I don't know. God exists, God don't exist. All I'm doing is I'm going to follow the observation and let the observation take me wherever it takes. That's what a scientist should do. The fact that a scientist says that he's an atheist and starts to poke fun and holes at people who believe in God says that the scientist is not being a scientist. He's trying to be a theologian, pronouncing upon what? On that which he cannot observe. And taking a position on faith that he can never back by his science. And therefore, when the science contradicts his faith beliefs, he finds it irritating. and he finds it completely disconcerting. You with me now?
I'm with you.
Good. So if any of the big scientists say, look, I don't know if God exists or not, here's what I know. I'm doing my experimentation. I started with the universe always existed. I'm walking through with that, fine. I realized it didn't always exist. Great. Let's go to the other theory now, that it had a beginning. Let's calculate. And all of this should be done in a value neutral way when it comes to whether God exists or not. That would be science. But I'm saying inside of our schools, we don't have science, we have science as a religion. Trying to prove atheism to be the truth, which is not a non-scientific claim. And that's where the problem is that we're having. You spend good money and energy and time raising your child as a Catholic. You send them to university, and in the first year university, you're spending good money for. They come back to you as an atheist. Because the professors who are scientists are committed to a religion called atheism, and they're proselytizing the students into this religion called atheism. Is this making more sense now?
No, I mean, I listen to my father make those pronouncements all the time. You know, I remember him saying clearly, I don't know why I spend all this money on you guys to send you all to university and for you all to come back not believing in God. You all have now become atheists. But yeah. I live to see that every one of these atheists
come back. Yeah. And they make the sweetest Christians in them.
They are.
So science and atheism, on the question of the existence of God, science, if they want to be scientists, working with the observable world, at best, should remain neutral, at the very best. It should make no difference one way or the other. That's the major challenge we have today. Atheism is really a belief system. Science is based on observation of reality. They are two separate species of things. One is in the realm of the observable, and one is not. Is religion and faith irrational? No. It's always based on reason. But the scientist, when he hooks into atheism as a creed, is now a religious leader in a religious faith, which he is promoting and evangelizing to people who come to him not for his religion, but for his science.
Correct.
And I'm saying it's disingenuous.
Yeah, but I think that they're sucked into it. So, you know.
And that's why I'm exploring it this way. I mean, it became clear to me in 2019, I had 5 conversations with Form 6 students from our top schools, top Catholic schools. And it became clear to me that when it came to the question of science was a religion for them. That was the noise that stopped them hearing why God makes sense. So I have to talk them through the science as religion to help them to see that the science can't pronounce on it first. It is not what the science actually says. If you carry science is real conclusions. And in fact, if you carry science as real conclusions, what science says is that something set this thing in motion. It couldn't always exist. So on this question, atheism is a belief system. It cannot be deduced from observation, and it cannot be proven. And therefore, it really should not be part of the language of the scientists. It just should not be. A scientist in his own capacity could claim to be an atheist, and that's fine. But the atheism should have nothing to do when it comes to his science. It should not be the precondition for him making his determination. So when Hawkins decided to choose the universe always existed, it was because he wanted to go against the normal scientific, the normal Christian, Judeo-Christian belief that the world had a beginning. You with me now?
I am with you.
So in walks a guy called Robert Jastrow. He claims to be an agnostic and a scientist. But Jastrow took a very different position. He recognized that the work in the work of a guy called Penzias and Robert Wilson, that changed the whole debate about the Big Bang forever. And these two men stumbled upon what I would call celestial static that they could not explain. It's like a static that was cosmic background radiation. It's from that experience or that observation and discovery, we now have the microwave. And that's where the whole theory around using microwave for useful purpose came from what they were doing. And this is the residue of heat and light left over from the initial fireball of the universe. So no matter where they observed, this celestial static was there. It was everywhere. And so they developed their theories and they came to see the cosmic background, the radiation, the static, that it was a leftover from the initial fireball of the universe that we now call the Big Bang. And once that was seen, then that radiation, which is the debris, the cosmic debris of the Big Bang, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have a bonfire, and then you have embers, you have ash. Somebody could walk into a camp 20 days later, 6 months later, and say, oh, we had a fire here?
Yeah.
Take that to the cosmic level. That's what those guys have done. By looking at the radiation, its patterns, its frequencies, they said, oh, there was a fireball here. And once they came to that, it became for Joshua one of the most important discoveries in science. He says from Galileo to Newton to his day, the discovery of the microwave behind the cosmic noise that is permeating all of the cosmos, that is the most important discovery. Why? It shows that the world had a beginning. The world had a beginning. Now, don't take my word for it. Go and look for Robert Jastrow, Jastrow. Go and look on YouTube for Jastrow, and he has a couple videos, and follow him on as he describes the Big Bang. Follow him as he describes science and religion. Follow him, because this is another top scientist who disagrees with the mainstream of science as atheism. what Jasro is saying, and he writes a book on that, and you can get the book as a free download PDF. So go and look for it. It's called God and the Astronomers.
What a name.
Look for it. Huh?
I'll say, what a name.
God and the Astronomers. Google God and the Astronomers PDF. You'll get it. You sign up to the site. They send you the book for free. Go and look for it and go and read it. Go and follow the science. He says 5 different lines of evidence. 5 different lines of evidence points him to the fact that there must have been a beginning, and that beginning must have been intelligent. The first is the motions of the galaxy, the discovery of the primordial fireball, the laws of thermodynamics, the abundance of helium in the universe, and the life story of the stars all point to one conclusion. All indicate that the universe had a beginning. So from the perspective of science, this universe, this cosmos did not always exist as we know it. It had a beginning. And anything that had a beginning, something had to make it or put it into motion. Because motion does not come into being without a force exerted onto it. So either the universe was eternal, or there is some being that was eternal that put the universe into motion. You with me now?
In the beginning. In the beginning.
So if you download Joshua's book, go and look at page 103, and you see where he walks through the science here. After he says that there was a beginning, he then goes on to list the scientists who simply cannot accept this view. And he concludes, the scientist has scaled the mountain of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he's greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. It's wicked, eh?
I love that. I love the quote there. As he has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He is about to conquer the highest peak. And as he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. That's beautiful.
It is beautiful, and and Jethro starts off as an agnostic. And he makes no description about God.
Yeah.
But what he does say is that what the theologians have been saying for centuries is what science has caught up to now, when they have put all the evidence together, and when they look at it through the lens of science, it is closer to what the theologians have been saying for centuries than what science has been speaking about with atheism. How you like that one?
Boy, I was just thinking of a song, you know. Mama look a booty, hush your mouth, go away.
And if you want to find the quote in God and the Astronomers, look at page 107.
Remember,
don't download the book. I want you to download the book. I want you to read the book. I want you to follow Jethro on YouTube. Let's think about this together. Let's really think this through together. Because this is a fundamental that stops a lot of our young people. It stopped me. That if the way doing science, the question is there really a room for God? Is there really room for God? And what the scientists are saying is, yes, there's a room for God. So having scaled the mountain of ignorance and clearing through the debris of ignorance about the natural world, the universe, the cosmos, developing instruments to be able to observe that we never had before, that our generation in the last 100 years or 60 years, we have had instruments that were unthinkable 200 years ago, like the Hubble telescope and other instruments that we have developed. And having used these for observation and scale the mountains of ignorance and climbing the altitude of the world, where we are now conquering the highest peak of ignorance. When you pull over that final rock, you meet a band of theologians sitting down there for centuries. That is, in other words, when you get over that final rock, it is speaking about a universe that came into being in a finite time, in a finite moment, where mass, time, and space all came into being in one great push that now scientists call the Big Bang, so named by a Catholic priest. So named by a Catholic priest.
More about that Catholic priest later. Hold on.
So, does this prove that God exists? I'm not gone to there yet, you know. I haven't reached to the fact that God exists yet. What I've reached to the fact is that science should not be pronouncing on atheism. And that the ground of atheism, from a scientific perspective, is a non-ground and a non-scientific adventure. And it might be a private women fancy of a scientist, but it's really not a ground that the scientist, if he wants or she wants to be a scientist, should be dabbling in or speaking about. And even if we now want to look at that ground for atheism or theism, the ground actually points to a beginning of everything, which is very close to how the biblical story goes. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth and everything that existed. It is closer to the biblical story than it is to the scientific atheistic story. And then let's at least be honest to say that there is not an objection or opposition between science and religion, that in fact there is an opposition between science and atheism. That's really the opposition, not science and religion. And that science and atheism really should not be seen as bedfellows, because the atheism is a filter that is filtering the scientific inquiry and putting noise into the observation to make it unscientific.
I wanted to repeat that last statement there. For those listening, we only have a couple minutes ago, but
No.
I think it was critical with that last statement there.
The real opposition is between science and atheism, because that is between observation,
right,
and faith. That's like sand and water.
Chemics.
One could support or deny the other, but one should never lead the other. So for me, faith is reasonable. If my faith was irrational, then something is wrong with my faith. Atheism is a pronouncement about all-encompassing reality that a scientist could never justify from the tools of science.
Correct. He cannot prove it.
Not from the tools of science.
Yeah.
That is personal belief system. And my problem is that when the personal belief system of the scientist is used as a framer for the scientific experimentation, the personal belief system is adding noise into the science that is distracting the science from what science should be doing, which is pure observation of reality. And having reached where we reach, Jethro has demonstrated that in fact the science has pushed us to see that there was a beginning. And if there was a beginning, something had to set it in motion. And therefore, the science has pushed us to the place where, having scaled the heights of ignorance and gone up to the highest peak and pulled himself over, the scientist meets a band of theologians who've been sitting there for a couple of centuries. It's an amazing thing. So if we're going to go, at best, if the scientists are honest, they should conclude we do not know what force or energy set the Big Bang in motion. At very honest, they could say that. They must also conclude it was a force that was eternal. It was a force that was outside of time, and it was a force outside of space. It was a force that had no matter. Now, that's how we describe God.
Yes.
Eternal, Alpha and Omega, no time, no space. Time and space make no difference to God, no matter. And therefore, if this force is outside of time, outside of space, and outside of matter, then that's very close to how the theologian has described God from the very beginning. In the beginning, God created the heavens, the earth, and everything there. This is how Genesis starts. And now the scientist has come to say, well, if there was a beginning, something set it in motion. Who lit the fuse for the Big Bang is a real question that people don't want to have to argue. So what's my key message? The universe is expanding, and thus it had a beginning. This means some force or being that was eternal, that was outside of time, had no mass, and that had no beginning, brought everything that we know into being. What's my action step? Go and look at the YouTube video of Robert Jastrow. Or download his book, God and the Astronomers. Do a search on proofs for the existence of God. Look at a few of them and keep a very open mind and ask God to lead you to the truth. Now, if you are one of those people who have never questioned whether God exists or not, great. I am so happy for you. I am not one of those people. So I had to do this for the countless people, and more of our young people today, who have had the question, how do I know if to believe or not to believe? And all I'm saying thus far, I haven't reached a God yet. What I'm saying thus far is the language of science points to a more theological language than scientists are comfortable to accept.
What's your scripture reading?
O Lord our God, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory above the heavens. From the lips of children and of babes, you have ordained praise because of your enemies, to silence the foe and the avenger. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is man that you should be mindful of him? The Son of Man that you should care for him.
People, if you didn't know, that's Psalm number 8.
Psalm 8.
Psalm 8.
Father, we thank you that you lead us through our mind and our imagination, through our rationality, and through our capacity to know, that you lead us to seek truth and to seek it everywhere. And we pray, oh God, that you enlighten our minds, enlighten our hearts. Help us to be humble, honest seekers along this journey. That as we continue, Lord, journeying between faith and unbelief, that we may see the truth of your love and be drawn more and more deeply to you through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Amen.